People say home is where the heart is. But for me, home was where I learned to hold my breath. I used to think it was a place you could point to on a map. Maybe a small dot like Belridge, Nebraska, flat land, broken fences, wheat fields stretching out like forgotten prayers. But now at 35, sitting in my office in Denver, I know better. Home isn't always a refuge. Sometimes it's the fire you crawl out of. The house I grew up in stood on the edge of Belridge like a secret the town didn't want to talk about. 2 stories, chipped paint curtains always drawn. Inside, it was darker than outside even on the sunniest days. My father, Raymond Hayes, used to fix cars when he could stay sober long enough to hold a wrench. My mother, Carla, once worked at the grain office before she quit, said she was needed more at home, though no one ever seemed to need her. What they needed was the bottle. I was the oldest. Elias came 10 years after me and little Noel not long after that. I used to shield them with my body, my silence, my stories, whatever I had. Most nights I'd pull them into the small room we shared, close the door and talk about stars or volcanoes, anything that didn't sound like shouting or shattering glass. I knew I couldn't save them completely, but I could give them one more night without bruises. School was the only place that felt like air. My 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Harland, once found me staring too long at a slab of quartz. He didn't laugh. He just said, "You see things in the stone, don't you?" I nodded, unsure if it was a trick. But it wasn't. He started leaving books on my desk. Geology textbooks, field guides, even an old college lab manual. I read them all by flashlight under the covers when the power was out again. By 17, I was working before and after school, paper routes, stocking shelves, cleaning grain trucks. I saved every dollar in a coffee can buried behind the house. It wasn't just money, it was fuel. I got out the day my acceptance letter came from the University of Colorado. Full ride, geology major. I packed one bag, kissed Elias and Noel on the head, and promised I'd come back for them. Then I got on the bus and didn't look back. Not at the house, not at my parents, not even at the sky. I didn't know then that escaping a place doesn't mean it stops living inside you. Boulder didn't smell like sweat and smoke. That was the first thing I noticed. The air was sharp clean, like I'd stepped into another life entirely. The campus at the University of Colorado was all red brick buildings and green courtyards. Everyone moved like they belonged. I didn't. My clothes were second-hand, my textbooks borrowed from the library, my smile careful. I spent most of my time either in class or working washing dishes in the cafeteria, shoveling snow in the winter, delivering pizza on weekends. The scholarship covered tuition and housing, but everything else came from me. Whatever I didn't need, I sent back home. I knew what happened when there was no money. I couldn't stop the yelling, but maybe I could soften the edge of it for Elias and Noel. I first saw her behind the library counter, sliding a returned book into place. Wren. Her name sounded like it belonged to someone who listened more than she spoke, and it fit. She had these clear green eyes and a way of pausing before she spoke, like she was measuring the weight of her words. I was checking out a geology text I'd already read 3 times when she smiled and said, "You know you don't have to pretend to return it. I know you're just visiting it." I laughed, really laughed, not just the polite chuckle I gave professors or customers. After that, I found reasons to stop by the library more often. She never pried. That's what drew me in. She asked about minerals, about what drew me to rocks and soil, and when I told her I liked that the earth told the truth in layers, she didn't make a joke. She just nodded like she understood. I never told her about Belridge, about the yelling, the bruises, the nights Elias cried himself to sleep. I didn't want that darkness to touch her. Wren was light, all quiet curiosity and soft certainty. For a while I let myself believe that if I stayed in her orbit long enough, I'd become someone worthy of love. We talked about the future in small pieces, what kind of house we'd live in, what books we'd read to our kids. I held on to those dreams like oxygen, even as the past began tapping at the walls again. The call came late past midnight after a double shift and 2 hours of studying. I almost didn't pick up, but the number had a Bell Ridge area code, and some part of me, no matter how long I'd been gone, still flinched when that town whispered back. My father's voice was rough with liquor, but steadier than usual. "You need to come home, Callum. It's important." That was all he said. No context, no apology. Just that strange weight in his tone, like a warning hiding inside a favor. I didn't want to go, but Wren had noticed something in me lately. More distant, more distracted. I told her it was work, but the truth was Elias had written me a letter. He said Noel had been skipping school, that the house had holes in the roof, that Dad wasn't just drinking, now he was borrowing from people he couldn't pay back. So I went. Bellridge hadn't changed. The roads were still cracked. The air still held that dull ache of forgotten things. My parents' house looked worse than I remembered. The siding had peeled further, and the porch sagged like it was tired of waiting for someone to fix it. Inside, my father sat in his usual chair, a bottle half hidden behind his leg. My mother stood stiff near the window. Neither hugged me. "There's a way to solve everything," my father said after a long silence. "Patrick Quinn, remember him? He's offering us $500,000. I waited. Then he added, "If you marry his daughter, her name's Odessa. She had a car accident. She's in a wheelchair. But she's good, quiet, smart." I laughed. It was a sound without humor. "I'm with someone. I'm building a life here." My mother stepped in, then voice low and sharp. "You're the eldest. You owe us." I left that night without sleeping, without saying goodbye. When I told Wren, she looked like she'd been waiting for something like this. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "Callum, maybe this isn't going to work after all." I begged her to tell me what changed, but her voice was flat. "You're always somewhere else now. I can't be the one holding us up." And just like that, she let go. I stared at the phone long after she hung up, the silence louder than any goodbye I'd ever known. The days after Wren left felt like walking through water, heavy, slow, everything muffled. I went to work, kept my head down, but when I got home, the silence hollowed me out. I stopped writing to Elias. I stopped checking my savings account. I started drinking. Not heavily, not like my father, but enough to dull the corners. I didn't answer my parents' calls at first, but they kept leaving messages. My mother's voice, sharp and rehearsed. "You owe this family everything. My father's more direct. You think you're better than us, Patrick's still waiting." I told myself I wouldn't go back, that I hadn't worked this hard to trade one kind of prison for another. But the apartment grew colder, quieter. Wren's things were gone. Her toothbrush, her books, the framed photo of us at the summit trail, it all disappeared like it had never been there. Eventually I called them back. The wedding was 3 weeks later, held in a church that smelled of mildew and old wood. Odessa wore a simple white dress. Her black hair was tied back, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at me much. I don't blame her. We said the vows. Mine felt like someone else's words coming out of my mouth. No one cried. No music played. Just the minister's voice echoing through the nearly empty pews, and Declan sitting in the back jaw, clenched like he wanted to scream. Odessa's father handed my parents a check after the ceremony. I saw it folded twice, stuffed into my mother's purse like a grocery receipt. We moved into a one-story house on the edge of Denver. It had 3 rooms, thin walls, and furniture that looked new but unloved. Odessa took the bedroom. I took the couch. Most nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I ended up here, how quickly a life could unravel without anyone really noticing. She didn't speak much. Neither did I. We were polite, distant, 2 strangers legally tethered by money and quiet resignation. But one night I heard her reading in the next room, her voice low, steady, tracing lines of text about distant stars. The days passed without shape. I went to work, came home, and collapsed on the couch without saying much. Odessa stayed in her room most of the time, door cracked open just enough to spill a sliver of lamplight into the hallway. We didn't fight. We didn't laugh. We existed like two ghosts haunting the same walls. She cooked sometimes, left plates on the kitchen counter without comment. I ate without looking at her. It wasn't anger, it was weight, a kind of heaviness that lived in my chest and wouldn't let me move toward anything resembling connection. One night I came home soaked from a storm, dripping onto the floor, like I belonged outside more than in. She looked up from the couch, a thick book open on her lap. "You should change. You'll get sick," she said. Her voice caught me off guard, soft, sure not pitying. I nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. When I came back, she was still there. "You don't have to avoid me, Callum," she said, not looking away from her book. "We're married. We could at least try to speak like people." I stood there unsure what to say. Then I sat in the chair across from her and stared at the edge of the coffee table. "What are you reading?" I asked finally. "Black holes," she said. "Astrophysics was my major." I blinked. "Really?" She smiled faintly. "Not all girls in wheelchairs want to be saints or teachers." She told me about the stars, how they bend light, how time slows near gravity that's strong. I didn't understand half of it, but the way she talked, the certainty, the wonder, it was like watching someone remember how to breathe. A few nights later, I passed her door and saw her sitting in the dark, back turned, her shoulders shaking slightly. I didn't knock. I just stood there feeling like I was trespassing in someone else's grief. After that, I noticed more. The way she traced the rim of her mug twice before sipping. How she stared out the window at nothing for long stretches. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore, it was careful. And one evening, she surprised me again. She asked what kind of rocks I worked with. It started with a packet of seeds left on the kitchen table, sunflowers, daisies, lavender. I didn't ask where they came from, and Odessa didn't explain. She just wheeled herself into the overgrown backyard one Saturday morning and said, "I want to plant something. Will you help?" I almost said no. I had a backlog of reports to finish, and digging in dirt felt too domestic. But she looked up at me with that steady, unhurried gaze of hers, and I found myself grabbing a shovel from the shed. The soil was dry and stubborn. She pointed out spots, guided me with her hands while I broke the ground open. She laughed when I spilled a whole bag of fertilizer on my shoes. I hadn't heard her laugh before, not like that. It was sharp and sudden, like sunlight through a cloud you forgot was there. "You're terrible at this," she said. "You're the one who hired me," I shot back. We spent most of the afternoon like that. She told me about her father's garden before the accident. I told her about quartz veins and fault lines and how lithium forms deep underground, buried under time and pressure. She listened like it mattered, like I mattered. That night I found her notebook on the kitchen counter. It was open to a page filled with constellations and equations I couldn't follow. At the bottom she'd written in small, careful print, "Everything has a reason, even if we don't see it yet." I closed the book gently and returned it to her desk. I still thought of Wren sometimes. Not her face, really. More the version of myself I'd tried to become when I was with her. But it didn't ache like it used to. Odessa and I weren't in love. Not yet. But the silence had changed between us. It felt softer now, like something waiting to bloom. That next week, I came home late from work to find Odessa on the porch, watching the flowers take root in the dirt we'd turned together. It was early evening when the doorbell rang. Odessa was in the kitchen, humming faintly while slicing apples. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door, half expecting a neighbor, maybe a delivery. But it was Wren. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes more formal than I remembered. Her eyes held something brittle, like she'd practiced this moment and still wasn't ready. "Callum," she said, voice tight. "Can we talk?" We stood on the porch. I didn't invite her in. She didn't waste time. "Your parents paid me to leave you, offered me $10,000 if I broke things off. I took it because I thought I was saving you from them. But they never gave me the money. I tried to tell you. I wrote letters, but I don't know if they ever got to you. The words came fast, like she'd been holding them in for years. I couldn't speak. The air around me felt heavier, warped. I didn't do it because I stopped loving you, she said. I did it because I was scared. Of them. Of what we'd have to carry. I thought you'd be better off. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what part of me agreed. Maybe the one that still remembered our dreams, the ones we stitched together in borrowed time. But as I looked at her standing there, apology drawn across her face like a second skin, I realized I didn't feel what I thought I would. No flood of anger, no rush of wanting her back, just a quiet, steady awareness that the place she once held in me had grown over. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. I know I said. She didn't ask for anything else. Just gave me a sad smile and walked away. I stood there for a long while after she left, watching the sun drop behind the rooftops. When I turned back inside, Odessa was still in the kitchen, her eyes meeting mine across the room. Odessa's father passed in late September quietly in his sleep. She didn't cry at the funeral, but her hands trembled when she placed the daisies on his grave. He left her a modest inheritance and a plot of land near the foothills, rocky, dry, the kind of place most would call worthless. We visited it a few weeks later, more out of obligation than interest. The grass barely reached ankle height, and the soil was hard stubborn. Odessa stared out over the hills like she was trying to see what her father saw in it. He always said this place had potential, she murmured. Everyone else laughed. I bent down and ran my fingers through the dirt, not expecting much. But something about the weight of the stones, the sheen beneath the dust, it made me pause. I took a few samples home, unsure why I even bothered. At the lab, I tested them quietly after hours. The readings made me sit down. High lithium content, consistent, dense. I ran the numbers twice, then again. It wasn't just a trace deposit, it was massive. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I spread the reports on the kitchen table. Odessa read them slowly, lips pressed together. When she looked up, I saw something in her I hadn't seen before, not hope exactly, but recognition, like a door opening she never believed was real. We didn't rush. I brought the data to my company. Meetings followed, surveys, verifications. When the confirmation came, it felt surreal, hundreds of millions in mineral rights. We kept the land, sold the extraction contracts, and with that, everything changed. We paid off debts, started a college fund for Elias and Noel, donated to youth shelters. Odessa began designing a garden for the land, not to grow crops, but to plant color where there used to be stone. The house felt different now. Not because of the money, but because we moved through it with intention. We cooked together, read in the same room, slept with the door open. One evening, I found Odessa sitting in the garden dirt on her hands, staring at the horizon like it was finally hers. They showed up without calling. My father's shirt was wrinkled, his hair thinner than I remembered. My mother wore a forced smile, like she wasn't sure whether to beg or accuse. I let them into the living room out of instinct, not invitation. "You've done well for yourself," my father said, eyeing the hardwood floors. "Nice place. Big." He didn't wait long. "We heard about the land, the money. Your mother and I, well, we don't have much left. We thought maybe you could help out. You know family." I looked at them for a long moment, the weight of old memories pressing against my ribs. "You already got 500,000, I said. "You spent it. That was your help." My mother shifted in her seat. "That was different. You were nobody then. Now you're something." My hands tightened. "You bribed Ren to leave me. You sold me into a marriage you thought would make you rich. And now you want more?" My father scoffed. "If it weren't for us, you wouldn't be here. We raised you. We gave you everything." "No," I said, standing. "You gave me scars. Elias, Noel, and Odessa. That's my family now. You don't get to show up and rewrite the story." They didn't argue much after that. My mother mumbled something about betrayal, about blood. But I walked to the door and opened it. "Take care of yourselves," I said quietly. "But don't come back." When the door clicked shut behind them, it felt like a decade exhaling from my chest. Odessa rolled into the room, her eyes steady on mine. I didn't have to say a word. She already knew. That night we sat outside under the stars, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something to fall apart. We named the foundation after Odessa's father, the Quinn House. It offered scholarships, housing, and counseling for kids trying to break free from homes like the one I grew up in. Odessa managed most of it from her desk in the sunroom, a space filled with wildflowers and physics books. She finished her manuscript a year later, a quiet, powerful book about stars, time, and healing. Elias got into an engineering program in Fort Collins. Noel, quiet as ever, started painting bold colors, wide strokes. I hung one of his canvases in our kitchen next to the window, where the morning light hit just right. Our home in Boulder wasn't grand, but it was ours. There was laughter in it, music, the smell of rosemary and fresh bread. I never stopped working. I didn't need the money, just the rhythm, but I came home every day like it was something sacred. Sometimes I thought about what brought me here, my parents, Ren, that terrible offer. I didn't thank them. They hadn't earned that. But I understood that pain was the first door I had to walk through, and behind it somehow was everything I'd ever wanted without knowing I deserved it.